reasons that are spiritual, because of the challenges that I see that are presented before the young people that are there, and how they navigate those challenges and difficulties, but also the challenges that we deal with every day that seemingly go away when you get in a place like Maywood, and how you can find a way to be really focused on your spiritual life and make changes and improvements that last beyond the boundaries of that camp. And I also like to go for reasons that aren't spiritual too. I like to see the competitions that are, a part of the week. Tony started this thing a couple of years ago, and the reason why I feel like the need to tell you all this, both the not spiritual things and the spiritual things, lessons from Maywood type lessons, things like that, is because I know that if you sent a teen to camp, then you probably don't hear about this stuff, because teens don't tell their parents anything. And then if you don't go to camp, then maybe you're not aware of some of the things that we do there. And so I wanted to share what your money that you contribute to send kids to and things like that, I want you to be aware of that and to see what goes on other than just maybe a few pictures you see on Facebook. But Tony started this thing a couple of years ago called the Coolest Minister Challenge. And all the ministers and youth ministers that are there throughout the week, there's a series of challenges every night that they participate in. And then at the end of the week, there's a Coolest Minister trophy that the coolest minister gets to take home and put in his office and all this kind of stuff. And the one year that I was in the running, I just got truly, man, they did me wrong in the finale there. But it's okay. Austin Johnson took that, and it is what it is. And then there are parts of that challenge that really make it difficult to like Tony or Emily. I'm not sure who comes up with them. But like, for instance, this year there was an occasion where we were going to have to eat Vienna sausages out of some camper's toes. Where they had to hold a Vienna sausage between their toes, and you were going to have to eat it out of there. And if you've been around camp kids, then they usually do one of two things. Either they wear tennis shoes, and who knows if they change their socks the whole week. And then if they don't wear tennis shoes, they probably wear something like Chacos, and it rains and gets nasty. It's a tough deal. But aside from all of those nasty and fun things that we do, it's an incredibly spiritual week that involves changes and great spiritual decisions. And I'd like to share some of those with you. I do this every year since I've been going, and I'd like to continue that theme. I also had a couple of pictures on my phone that Eli Pounders took. My phone was laying there on the ground. I had left it and came back to my camera roll. I told him I was going to put them up there tonight, but I didn't, Eli. I'd save you the embarrassment from all these great, funny pictures that made it on there. A couple of lessons I'd like to share with you tonight from Maywood, 5 to be exact. Number one, I noticed that throughout this week, and I'll share some of these real life experiences from our kids as we go, and other general experiences as well. But it's important to have friends that build your faith. I guess in our own lives, like, we realize that there are those. The truth of the matter is that probably all of us have people that we would consider to be fans, I guess. They're not really close enough to be friends, but you could say that they think highly of you, that you're not necessarily enemies or they're not your foe, so you might just consider them your fans. And there's several of those that you encounter. There are also lots of enemies that you might have. And you say enemies, but we're just talking about people that you aren't necessarily friends with. Maybe you don't get along with them. Maybe they don't run in the same circles as you. But I guess you could say that at the very core of our existence and our close relationships, we just don't have really many close friends. Like, we probably all have a couple that we consider to be our close friends. And oddly enough, it seems that way in the church too. That our church friends, they're more like the fan type relationship. That we have a relationship with them, but they're not necessarily our closest friends. And too few Christians enjoy close relationships with other people. Specifically, other people that aren't local to them, that don't sit beside them in their normal places of worship, but maybe even Christians from other congregations in the area. And as you spend a week in a place like Maywood and you see kids come together that maybe only get to see each other one time of year, or maybe just a couple if there's different youth events, but there are so many lessons, I think, that need to be taught, and especially this one is one that dominates my mind. And I usually start on day 2 and start making notes of this, but it's incredible to see the reality of the fact that we all need spiritual friends. We need friends that are close to us, friends that understand us, friends that will correct us if things that are wrong, friends that will listen when we're trying to talk, friends that will do their best to listen to understand and not necessarily listen to respond, friends that will, look after us or protect us or be the ones to speak up or that will shoulder our burdens when they get too much for us to bear. We need friends who, they just help us be like Christ. They spur us on to be more like Jesus. And what it calls for, I guess, maybe is an evaluation of who it is we spend our time with. Proverbs 13 and verse number 20 talks about these two individuals. There's a guy that spends time around the wise, and Solomon says typically the people that spend time around the wise, they become more wise. And the people that spend time around the fools, they become more foolish. And so there's an emphasis then, and not just in Proverbs 13:20, but scripture-wide on who you hang out with and who you spend your time around, whether you're a young person or you're an old person. They say, show me your friends and you'll see your future. That who you spend your time with and how they influence your life will shape the kind of person that you are. Specifically at Maywood, let me give you a couple of examples that I saw. I've told you, and you have known, most of you at least, that every night we end our devotional settings with a circle where kids will circle up and we'll sing a song, and they're given an opportunity, if they so desire, to respond, if you will, sort of like our response here at the end of the invitation, that they're given a chance to maybe go into the middle of the circle. There's a card they can write if they have something they want to pray for or something they want someone to be aware of, and we read each one of those individually and we pray for them. We spend time talking to those kids after that circle's over, dealing with the needs and the struggles that they have. Each youth minister usually takes those in his own youth group and things like that, but it's a really intentional moment. And there was one particular night where I watched a person that I'm sure probably all of you know write something to the extent of, sometimes I feel like I'm not worth it, like that God doesn't see me as something that's valuable. And I listened to those words, and those weren't the exact ones, but that's the gist of the idea. And then one of their friends, after it was all said and done, when they all hug each other and they're all encouraging, I watched them place both hands on each shoulder, and they looked them right in the eye, and they were like, "You will never let God down." And I listened to them say that, and I'm thinking, man, what a friend. What an incredible lesson to hear from a 14-year-old kid to say to a 16-year-old kid, you will never, ever let God down. Or then you hear those conversations where they're actually admitting to a sin in their life, where they have that struggle, and it's because their friends have spurred them along to be more faithful, that they've actually given them a great example of what it's like to be a Christian. At Maywood, I saw friendships that help other people see God in their lives, and I saw friendships that help other people see sin in their lives. You're one friend away from being a better parent, one friend away from being a better spouse, a better student, a better Christian, or you're one friend away from being a worse any one of those. One thing I saw this week or last week that I really made an impression on my brain, and one I feel like that if as much as we go to teach kids at camp, and I think that's our mentality sometimes, like we want these kids to grow spiritually. If there's one thing that I wish those kids could teach us, it's that it's important to have friends who build your faith. Number two, I've noticed this week that kids aren't the church of tomorrow. And I look back over a couple of years where I've done these lessons, and there's usually one that always includes these words in the lessons that I've done, because I think it needs to be emphasized. You hear that sometimes, that our youth groups and our kids, they're the church of tomorrow, and we need to be setting a great example for them, and we need to be modeling Christianity so that when it's their time to take over, when the old people pass along, and when those opportunities for them to step up and take leadership roles and all that good stuff, whenever that time comes, then they'll be ready. So we need to be modeling that for them today. I would argue tonight that kids aren't the church of tomorrow, and we've heard it said that they are the church of today. Let me give you a couple of examples in the scripture that I think will help us see this idea. If you start in the Old Testament, you immediately are introduced to a guy named Joseph right there in Genesis. And what we learn about Joseph in Genesis 37 is that he was 17 years old. When all of these events of his life start to unfold, Joseph's 17 years old. Not hardly a man at all by any standards, but he is thrown into the adult world, I guess, that he's having to leave his family by force. He didn't choose to be leaving his family, but he was forced to leave his family, and essentially he had to grow up really quick because life was throwing things at him. He was put in situations where he was going to have to choose which identity he was going to hold on to. Was he going to hold on to the faith that he had in God and choose to be right and faithful in the eyes of God, or was he going to compromise because it was easy and convenient? Was he going to give in to the temptations and the desires that were presented to him that might possibly come along with prestige and elevation when he got to Egypt, or he chooses to be faithful to God knowing that he's going to go to prison? All of these things that Joseph was forced to do. And the one thing that I'm impressed with is that this happens at an early stage in Joseph's life, that God didn't wait till he achieved the pinnacle of being a father or achieved the pinnacle of being 30 years old or anything like that, where he achieved some level of spirituality that made him qualified to do whatever it was that was needed to be done for God, but that he started then. When he was 17, or David in 1 Samuel 17, you know that we talk about the little David, or the shepherd boy. That's what the Bible even calls him, that he's just a shepherd boy. He's not even a grown man yet. He's just a little teenager that can't even fit in adult-sized armor. And he goes against this big, great giant. And all of that happens when David is just a little shepherd boy. I thought about Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 2, probably Paul's most trusted associate, maybe the guy that he relied on more than anyone, or at least the advice that he gives or the words that Paul uses to describe their relationship. You could argue that there was no friend closer to Paul than the young Timothy. And when he wrote to the Philippian church, Paul did, he told him, I'm going to send you my friend Timothy. He even said in Philippians 2 and verse 20 that there's no one like Timothy. There's no one that can do what Timothy can do. And Timothy's going to be genuinely concerned for your well-being. He's going to look after you. And Paul is saying this about this young guy, Timothy, the guy who had not, preached for 30 years, or the guy that had not had the great education or the great family or anything like that. All of these things prove that these cases, I guess you could say, were evidence that young people are capable of courageous faith, that they're capable of being worthy examples for anyone to follow, not just for young people, but even those of old. And what I think we do when we say, well, the kids are the church of tomorrow, or we need to do a better job of modeling them so that when they do take over, and it's like we don't realize the potential or the capability of what our kids have. It's like I'm always amazed, like on the second Sunday when we do have our singings, and we put 4, 5, 6 young people up here, and how incredibly talented they are. That our young people that sit right here in this place are incredibly talented. Or you listen to the devotionals that they do on Wednesday night, and you hear the thoughts and the things that they deal with and the things that they relay to us, their vulnerability, their ability to teach and to show exactly what they can do. Probably one of the things that sticks out to my mind more than anything is that very fact. And we talk about this a lot, or at least I've told you this, that the one thing that makes an impression on me, perhaps more than any, is their ability to be transparent with what they're dealing with. And this year, Tony, I don't know, in my recent memory, I guess this was my 4th or 5th year at Maywood with Chisholm Hills, man, I don't remember a year that was like more heavy with the things that the kids were admitting, whether it was just the struggles that they were having with being a Christian. And that's a heavy thing, especially when you're 14, 15, 16 years old and you're trying to figure out who you are in your faith. And they're saying, look, I'm having trouble deciding how to live or how to act. That's a heavy thing. But then you also have those moments of vulnerability when a kid says, look, my home life is terrible and my family doesn't get along. I'm struggling with mental problems and mental struggles, and I've even tried to hurt myself. I mean, all of these things that these kids are just pouring out and they're laying out before us. And I think about all of those occasions where we're like, man, we need to teach these kids this and we need to teach these kids that, if we'd sometimes just stop and learn from them. If sometimes we just stop and listen and see the untapped potential that they have before them. I'm mindful of a few from our own congregation. It was in the bulletin. I don't know if you saw it, but Paola was there. Brandon Durr, Brian Flores, Sophia Gonzalez, Sam Lumpkins, Rachel Owens, Eli Pounders, Kennedy Robinson. Those are just a few from our own congregation that responded in some way, whether it was in a big public setting or if they pulled Tony or I aside and had a conversation about things that they were struggling with. And they covered all the spectrum of all those things that we just talked about, what we could learn if we just stopped and listened to the kids that are the church of today. and not the church of tomorrow. Lesson number 3 from Maywood. One thing that I learned and that I love more than anything, Romans 12:15 is really amazing. Romans 12:15, Paul says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. A couple of things, I guess, that just really stick out to me, and even in Connor's reading in Hebrews 13, verses 1 through 3, that's the Hebrews writer's message. He says, pay special attention to those who are neglected, because by doing so, you might be entertaining angels unaware. Of course, talking back to Abraham and Lot's experience where they actually did entertain 3 angels, and they were unaware of it. But the Hebrews writer's saying, by you doing that, man, it's like God's seeing you as helping an angel. This is a big deal, the way you treat. But Hebrews 13:3 is really key too, and he's talking about those who are mistreated in prison. He said it's as though you were mistreated with them. That's how seriously you took caring for those people. Romans 12 and verse 15, like I mentioned a moment ago, where Paul says to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Empathy is a difficult thing. I don't always do it really well. Some people, I guess, have a better way of empathizing, or what we mean when we say empathy is feeling what other people feel. I don't always do that well, and I wish that I could, and there are others of you that I learn from every day when I watch or when I listen to see how you handle problems. But someone also said to me that empathy was seeing the world from the perspective of someone else, or seeing their world from their perspective. It's understanding how you can best possibly see or feel or know what someone is experiencing. Listen to what the Hebrews writer says. Let brotherly love continue, Hebrews 13, verse 1. Verse 3, remember those who are in prison as though in prison with them, those who are mistreated as though you were also being mistreated. The Hebrews writer was appealing to the empathetic nature of people that had become Christians. He's saying don't just feel sorry for the people who are in need, but actually try to put yourself in their shoes so that you can help them in their affliction. James even says that in James 1, that that's pure and undefiled religion, that you visit the fatherless and the widows and help them in their affliction. That's the whole point, that Christianity is about being an empathetic person. It's natural to do that, to try to empathize with people who suffer. On the other side of the coin, it's difficult. It's difficult to empathize. It's difficult to put myself in other people's shoes, or to try to figure out what they're feeling, or try to understand the situation. If you're a good learner, it's hard to empathize with someone who has difficulties learning. Or if you're a joyful person, or you're a happy person, and you don't have struggles with anxiety or depression, it's really hard to understand why a person might have depressive behaviors or anxiety things, or things that make them be anxious. It's hard to do that. It's hard to grasp what other people feel. Then there's also some of us that just intentionally try to block out the pain of other people. We don't want to be burdened with their pain, and so we try our hardest not to empathize, because we think that if I do, then that means their problems are going to mess my life up. That their issues are going to become my issues, and then it's going to throw me all off. Or maybe we believe that the person who's hurting, they did it to themselves. The reason they're hurting is because of their own issues, and they deserve what they're getting. It could be that we view those people as enemies, and so we'll try our hardest not to empathize with those people. Not so at Maywood. And I'm not saying it's a perfect place. I'm not at all. But what I experienced this week, or the week that we were there, it just wasn't the case. That Romans 12:15 is an incredibly amazing thing. Had a couple of baptisms, at camp, and I always like to see that. I've never experienced this before, but when one person gets baptized at camp, like their whole friend group goes in with them. And they stand around them and they lock arms, and they stand holding arms and shoulders together around the person that's being baptized. Or like we said, if someone does admit that they're struggling with something, it takes you 5 or 10 minutes just to get to that one person, because everyone else is crowding around them just to cry with them. You've got people that are sitting on the floor of that nasty Solomon's porch that are just crying their eyes out. And the whole reason is because the person that they love is crying their eyes out. The person that they love is feeling something really deep, and they're feeling something that's really burdening their heart. And they don't even really try to understand it in that moment. They just know that person's hurting, so I'm hurting. Or that person's happy, so I'm happy. Oh, what we can learn. Oh, what we can learn from the kids. They don't feel alone there. We shouldn't feel that way here. Number 4, the experience is much more rich if you participate and not spectate. One of the things that bugs me about camp is you have all those kids that ask, do we have to do this? You know, Tony comes over the speaker, man, everybody at the ball field at 1 o'clock, do we have to? I want to lay in my bed and sleep, and trust me, I want to do that too. I get it, but I learned that those memories that you have and that you create, even when you don't want to do that, it's much better when you participate. That the bloody noses and the broken bones, all that stuff happens when you get out of your bed. You know, all the fun stuff, the calls to the parents because somebody's been hurt and all that. That stuff happens when you get out of your bed and you participate. But also not just the crazy things like that, the bloody noses and the broken bones, but the real memories. The moments that you get to talk about to your parents when you get home, or the moments that you get to ask your kids about, those things that really change their lives, I can promise you it didn't happen because they were laying in their bed. It happened because they were participating. And you growing spiritually in your congregation, in this case at Chisholm Hills, it's not going to happen if you just spectate. It's not going to happen if you just sit there and don't involve yourself in anything. In this case, it's not going to happen if you sit in the pews and just don't involve yourself in anything. And the opportunities that you have to grow spiritually, even if it's not just in a worship setting, but the opportunities that our elders give us on whatever occasion, or those moments when we gather together to eat, or when we have game nights, or whatever it is, those are opportunities for us to immerse ourselves in a Christian culture and grow, to be influenced by other people and to encourage other people and to grow our faith and to create those memories that will last forever, even ultimately through eternity. And when you look at what happens with those kids, they grow stronger because they're actually involved in the activities, in those Bible classes, and in those question and answer sessions. It's so much better. You get so much more out of it when you're participating. Paul, when he talked to the Corinthian church in 1st and 2nd Corinthians, but particularly in 1 Corinthians 9, he gives this illustration beginning in verse 24 about this athlete that involves himself in the race. And he talks about the necessity of training and pushing himself so that he could be the best that he could be. And then he compares it to this idea of this, I guess, group of people that just weren't really doing anything. And he's like, the person that's rewarded is the athlete, the one that's training, the one that's trying to endure, the one that's trying to prepare himself for the race and for the finish line. That's the person that's blessed, not the person that's not doing anything and watching. And usually those are the people that have the complaints. And those are the people that always find the problems, or the people that aren't doing anything. And it's that way at camp too. The ones that always have something to say, they're not involved at all. Don't be a spectator. Participate. Whatever capacity that is that presents itself to you in your church home, in this case, Chisholm Hills, don't be a spectator. Participate. Number 5, and finally, the Christian life is so much more than do's and don'ts. You know, I can't think of a time in a Bible class this week where we sat down and we talked about anything that I would say is chalked up to a do or don't. You know, like sometimes in those settings when you get kids together and you have to have those conversations, and I'm not saying they're not necessary, but like the don't do this, and you don't need to do that, and you don't need to do that, and you don't need to act this way, and you don't need to do this and say that. And it's like sometimes that's how we present Christianity to people, is that it's just a massive list of do's and don'ts. And if you don't do these things and you do these things, then everything's going to be good and your faith is just perfect. You're going to go straight to heaven. But it's more than that. It's more than that. It's actually a life that is determined to please God. And by implication, when I do decide that my life is going to please God, well, there are things that I should not do and there are things that I should do, but it's not necessarily just an emphasis on those two things, but it's actually about experiencing and enjoying being in God's presence when you have that opportunity. It's actually about soaking up all of those great opportunities to grow in my faith and to capitalize on moments where I have an opportunity to change and to be challenged and to grow. And all of those things take place. One of my favorite moments of this past week, and we haven't done it completely, I guess, all of my years of going there. COVID kind of ruined a couple of those where we go down in the dungeon in close quarters in the dark and sing out loud. That's all it is. Just go in there and you just sing. And this year we got to experience in full force. And all it is like you just start a song and then all of a sudden you can't even hear yourself think because there's so many people just pouring out their heart. And there's always a few bad apples that'll ruin the bunch. Namely, that I think they were just trying to see how loud they could scream and get away with it. But there were others in there that were actually really singing their hearts out. And I mean, and like you could tell who they were. And even though I couldn't see, like you could just hear and feel the passion and the desire in their voice, that they had an opportunity to actually just lay it out there for God, and they did. Or in those classes or in those settings where they actually get a chance to be vulnerable and deal with the things that they're dealing with, or when they need to pull someone aside and talk to them about what they're struggling with, they do that, and I appreciate them for that, because a lot of times we don't. We come here and we have an opportunity to pour our hearts out before God, and we like, amazing grace. It's like we just, I don't know, or we have an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody about the things that we're struggling with. And maybe because we're afraid of what somebody might think about us because we're struggling with X, Y, or Z. Or, we actually do have a problem, and we're not perfect like we tell everybody we are. We miss that opportunity. Or like we have a chance to actually be challenged or to be changed or to be convicted. We have those opportunities, and we just don't take advantage of them. Oh, what we could learn from a week at Maywood. I wish we could all go. I wish we could just cancel church at Chisholm Hills and just all go, and we could all experience what happens down there. It's not perfect, and I'm not advocating that we just make Maywood our church at Chisholm Hills. That's not it either, but I just want you to know what your kids get to experience when they go, and your grandkids get to experience when they go, that it is fun and games and bloody noses and Vienna sausages from dirty toes. It's all that, but it's more than that. It's great experiences where I think Tony was the one who said, when you put people in spiritual situations, they make spiritual decisions, and that's true. They do. They make big spiritual decisions that change their lives, and what we can learn from those spiritual decisions. My encouragement for you tonight is to do what it takes to make a life that pleases God. If that means finding friends that'll build your faith, you got 120 of them right here. Look around. Find somebody that will build you up. Rely on them. Be vulnerable. Tell them what you're struggling with. Let's go through it together and not just on your own. Look around at the young people that we have. There's so many of them. And encourage them. Don't tell them, hey, you'll be a good song leader one day. You'll be a good song leader or a good preacher one day. You'll do this, a good dad. Encourage them now, right? Weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. I could do a better job of that myself. To find moments where we actually empathize with other people and we try to understand what it is they're dealing with and invest in it or participate. Whatever opportunity that is for you and I tonight, to participate in what is being offered for us, and more than that, to just be determined to please God. That we don't judge the measure of our Christian life by the things that we have done or the things that we haven't done or won't do, right? But to actually be determined to please God with everything that we have in us, to take advantage of the opportunities to pour out our heart to God and to be changed when we're convicted. Maybe you're not a Christian tonight. You never obeyed the gospel. You have an opportunity to do so. You have an opportunity to be changed by Jesus, to pour your heart out to Him and let Him take the brokenness of sin in your life and fix it and make you new. Or maybe you are a Christian. You've obeyed the gospel, and maybe it's just one of those things we talked about. Maybe it's a small tweak or a little change in your life that'll set you back on the course of a life that's pleasing to God. You have an opportunity to respond to heaven's invitation while we stand and as we sing.